Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. If you didn't know that's what we were doing, now you do. But if you didn't know that, you're here because you've seen on one of the various social platforms the chance to join us live with my guest. And that's what we'll be doing here shortly. I'll be bringing Patrick in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, because we're live now, but later this will be on our podcast, I just wanted to give you a chance to settle in. And if you are here with us live, I hope that you'll say hello and tell us where you're from in the comments section of whatever platform you happen to be on, whether that's LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, wherever that might be. And while you're here, I just want you to imagine that you're joining Patrick and I for a cup of coffee so you can share your questions and comments and ideas just like you would if we were all in the same physical location, because when you do that, it'll make for a better conversation for all of us. It will make it more valuable for you, and eventually it'll make for a better podcast. So since this will eventually be a part of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, which you can learn more about by going to wherever it is that you watch or listen to podcasts and sign up there, I'm going to do a countdown, which will be where we will trim this audio and video to start the podcast itself. So Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. Do you want a predictable way to accelerate the progress of your team and organization? My guest today says that you need to get rhythm. And when you get that rhythm, you have a chance to truly be predictable in your ability to execute and get breakthrough results. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could be with us live for future episodes on your favorite social channel. You can get all of those future live episodes and interact with us and see this information sooner by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. And today's episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Team, Designing a Team for Everyone's Success. You can learn more by going to longdistanceteambook.com. And when you go to longdistanceteambook.com, you can also get an excerpt of the book. I hope you'll do that. And I am so excited to have our guest here today. Let me bring him in, and I will introduce him before we dive in. His name is Patrick Thean. He's an international speaker, a CEO coach, and a serial entrepreneur. He is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. His work has been seen on NBC, CBS, and Fox. He was named in 1996 as the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in North Carolina when he grew his first company to be 151st on the Inc. 500, now the Inc. 5000. After a successful exit, he has been on a mission to help CEOs build great companies and achieve their dreams. He is our guest today. Oh, and he recently updated his book, updated version of his book, Rhythm, How to Achieve Breakthrough Execution and Accelerate Growth. And it's a step-by-step playbook for building an operating system to run your company. That's why he's here. That's why I'm excited he's here. Patrick, welcome. Glad to have you, sir.
Hey, Kevin. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here with you and your guests.
I am glad to have you here. And so I always like to sort of get a sense of what led people to where they are. And, you know, you've started multiple companies and then you exited from that and have sort of changed your focus to helping other companies grow. So what led to that shift and sort of what led all of you to doing this work now?
Well, I'll tell you, Medisys, my first company, was very successful from the outside looking in. From the inside looking out, it was running from one crisis to another, solving one fire to another, hair on fire. And, just when I thought I was going to crash and burn, we'd survive. And then we'll get to the next crisis. And there's at least 3 or 4 times where I thought the company was going to die. But we survived. And then suddenly we were successful, celebrated. So that was my journey. And when I finished that, a lot of entrepreneurs came and asked me for help, and I helped as much as I could. But I realized maybe I just wasn't as dumb as I thought. Some of these poor folks had some very similar problems as me. And then in 1999, Fortune magazine had an article written by Ram Charan called "Why CEOs Fail." I read that and it hit me. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so true. This is my experience." That people fail not because of a lack of strategy, but more because of a lack of execution. And execution being defined as an inability to get your commitments done. And so I started a journey, and that was about 20 years ago. I started a journey of helping CEOs not fail, but instead to realize their dreams and succeed and build great companies. So that's kind of what led me to this. And so we tend to help entrepreneurs, or not necessarily entrepreneurs, but CEOs. They could be, hired in CEOs, but we help people that have, frankly, have enough humility to say, dude, I'm dying here. Help me. So if the person doesn't need help and thinks that they're great, then they don't really need us. But in general, if somebody feels like, they're hitting the ceiling of complexity, growth has caused life to be very complicated. How do I simplify stuff? And I still remember walking the hallway when we had like 150 people at Medisys, and I asked my partner, I said, "Hey, who's that guy that walked by?" And Ray said, "Dude, you hired him a month ago. You don't remember?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't remember. But I don't even recognize him." But that's because we had like 150 plus people. And so complexity comes in as your success begins to hurt you in a sense, That's why I do what I do.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And I just want to set the table for all of you that are here. Not everyone here is a CEO, and Patrick knows that. We talked about that very briefly before we started. But all of you as leaders, having read the book, I can tell you that there's lots here, lots of wisdom that Patrick can share that applies to you. So if you're listening and you heard CEO or entrepreneur and said, "That's not me," don't leave, because there's plenty of great stuff here for you as we go. Now, you mentioned Ram Charan, who has been a guest here in the past. So anyone who's listening, we'll make sure we put that in the show notes so you can hear my conversation with Ram a couple of years ago. So the book is titled Rhythm. So, and in the opening, I said you would say we need to get rhythm. So why rhythm? Why is that the word? What's the meaning of that? Take us through that thought process.
And thank you very much, Kevin, for reminding me that, yes, our book, our concept, they work for all leaders looking to make a difference in the lives of the people that they lead. So why rhythm? I would say that, one of my friends said to me, "Patrick, when you grow a company and you're a leader in a growing company, there's always chaos. So it's not like you can get rid of chaos. The question is, how do you handle the chaos that comes in a way?" So rhythm gives you a framework, an operating system to kind of deal with that. And secondly, why rhythm, your question, is because what I've found is that when you can put yourself into a consistent rhythm, it gives you an opportunity to deal with a bunch of things, gives you a place to expect things which are unexpected. So, if something is unexpected hits you, you can look at it and say, "You know what, that's okay. It's Friday. We'll deal with it on a Monday weekly meeting," because I have a rhythm of a Monday weekly meeting. One of my other friends said to me, "Hey, Patrick, I have this new relationship, business relationship, and I really want that partner to really know us better, and I want to do more business with this partner." And I say, "You know what? Why don't you just put him on a rhythm with you? Call him once every 2 weeks or once a month, but you decide what is the right rhythm, and then you're hitting that person consistently." That person's done business with this gentleman now for about 4 or 5 years and is having a great time. Built a fantastic relationship. So what I've found is that rhythm is like a suspension. It's like a car that wants to go fast, needs a good suspension. Rhythm gives you that kind of suspension for your company, for your life.
Yeah, I'll just take that down to another level real quick. It's one of the exact same things that we say, Patrick, for leaders at any level, whether you're in the front line or wherever you are, of having regular one-on-ones with your team members. And they might be at different rhythms, different cadences based on that particular person, their needs, and et cetera. But if you don't have that set, I mean, I love your point of, hey, we'll talk about that in our meeting on Monday because we have a meeting on Monday. And so what I often say to my team is, hey, put that on the list for when we have our next one-on-one. They call it the Kevin list. Put it on your Kevin list, and then we'll get to it. And it doesn't become a it doesn't become a hair on fire moment. It doesn't mean drop everything and everything becomes urgent, because we have a rhythm, we have a place, we have a timeline. And you talk about a framework, and I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, as I look and think about the book, that the framework has three big parts, and you call it think rhythm, plan rhythm, and do rhythm. And that's kind of how I would like us to lay out our conversation today. But talk about what those three things mean from this framework perspective. We all know what those words mean, but what does this mean from this framework's perspective?
Well, I tell you what, Kevin, it means exactly what it says. A few years ago, I was a bit stressed, and my daughter, who at that time, she's now 20. I have two girls, one 23, one 20. And this is a bunch of years ago when my daughter was probably 15 or 14. I'm freaking out about something. And she said, "Daddy, think, plan, do, Daddy. You know how to do this. Just think, plan, do. Now it's time to think." I laughed when she said that to me. I was like, "Sweetheart, you're right. Daddy just need to think a little bit." So the think rhythm. So I would say that these are three rhythms that can actually be intertwined. Okay, they don't have to be linear. But let's start with think. Think is about making sure that you spend enough time to think about your business, about yourself, about your strategies. And when you get really busy, we tend to get into the rut of just doing, and then we stop thinking. So the think rhythm has a couple of different things. First is to make sure that you put yourself into a regular way to think. And one of my friends said, "Patrick, love your framework. Every quarter you want us to get together for a planning session. And I think it's like 2 days to think and plan, and then 88 days to execute." It's kind of how he looked at it. And so the think rhythm also makes sure that you review your growth strategies, because strategies cannot be birthed overnight. And I think oftentimes a company, especially the smaller ones that we work with companies which are what I call mid-market firms, typically about 100 employees or more, typically 20 to a few hundred million in revenue. So that size is where we play. And sometimes you're so busy working because you're having a wonderful harvest, and you wake up and you suddenly realize that your strategies are old, dated, and your competition is biting you, coming right up too close. So I want all my friends and customers to get into a think rhythm, to review their strategies and to renew them ahead of time, because you cannot wake up in the morning and go, "Oh my God, my strategy's dead. I need one tomorrow." It doesn't work that way.
No, not very well. It doesn't work very well that way. You're talking about how they intertwine. You're talking about how think moves into plan, and you think about quarterly. And I want to get into planning in a minute, but I want to stay on thinking, because I think that as leaders, many of us aren't very good at this. And it isn't just the story that you just shared of I've waited too long, but it's also building a daily rhythm of thinking. And how do we carve that time out? So I would really love for you to share how you do this and how you encourage others to develop the thinking habit. Like, what's your best advice around that? Because I think it's so critical for us as leaders. I don't care if you're a leader at the front line or you're the CEO. Like, we don't do this enough. As you said, we think we're too busy. What's your advice here?
So I would say get into a daily reflection. And so you get into a reflection rhythm. And I like to encourage all my friends, look, if you can do it daily, great. If you can't do it daily, that's okay. Do it weekly, but at least do it, right? Just begin. And so my formula is typically that I like to call it like a 10-10-10. I have three parts. The first part is that I spend about 10 minutes in just being grateful. I spend, being grateful to God, to I think of at least three people that I want to be thankful for. And I just spend some time in gratefulness. That causes my brain to kind of just relax. And maybe I'll play some music, do something that I enjoy, just kind of relax for about 10 minutes and be grateful. Then the next thing I do is I want to learn. I want to think about what are a couple of events that I can learn from. And when I first started doing this, Kevin, like most people, I only thought about the bad stuff. I screwed up this conversation with my wife. How do I do that better? So this is realization. After I spent enough time doing that, I began to realize that actually I'm missing a lot of gold from the things that I do right. So don't just reflect on the things you did wrong, But what did you really do so right? When were you so in the zone? How do you repeat that? And then the third 10 minutes I spend on pulling out my calendar and prioritizing what's in front of me so that I'm not just going into do without thinking. And then I encourage my friends to say, look, that's 30 minutes, right? Okay, if you can't do 10, 10, 10, do 5, 5, 5. If you can't do 5, 5, 5, do 1, 1, 1. In other words, just start. Just start and don't feel like, oh, I'm such a failure. You know, Patrick said 10, 10, 10, and I couldn't do it. Well, you can probably do 1, 1, 1 or 2, 2, 2 and build it up. And if you can't do daily, do it every few days or at least once a week. So I put myself into a daily rhythm. I open my day this way. And I don't get it perfect, by the way. I probably get it on a good week. I get it all 7 days. On a bad week, I get it probably 2 or 3 days. And then I have a same kind of rhythm to close my week. Same thing. What am I grateful for this week? What did I learn this week? What are 3 things in front of me next week that are really important? And so this begins to build the habit because, Kevin, it's a habit. It's a habit. It's hard to build.
It's 100% a habit. You know, for a couple of years, I think maybe even 3, Patrick, we did during November a gratitude challenge, and we did it with a bunch of folks, and in part it was to create that habit of that daily gratitude piece, which is so very important. And by the way, I think we may have had a technical problem with one or more of the platforms. So if you just got here, we're sorry that you missed the beginning. We'll make sure you get a link to the whole thing later. So I love that you started, when I knew that you would start with the idea of reflecting back, because that's really a source of our strength. It's a source of our learning, as you said. And I love that. Another one of the things that you mentioned in the book, I sometimes like to pull things out that perhaps no one's ever asked you about on a podcast before. And it's it's not a test though, I promise. One of the things that you mentioned, which I really love, is this idea of what you call the idea bench. So can you just talk about the idea bench for a second?
So the idea bench, there are a couple of different uses for it. In the first part of the book, in the Think Rhythm, right, we talk about winning moves. Winning moves are your growth strategies. So just to give you context here, and oftentimes we have too many ideas. In fact, most of the customers I work with, their challenge is they are dying by overeating from the buffet of opportunity. That's the problem. So what I get them to do is I get them to kind of rate their winning move ideas. And then there's 3 answers, by the way. Yes, we're going to do this strategy. That's a yes. No, we're not going to do it because it didn't make the cut as far as impact and our ability to actually execute it well. Then the third one is later. And so for the laters, we put them in the idea bench. And I find that when we put stuff in the idea bench, it frees up our mind because, you know, sometimes we have this really lovely idea. Well, we think it's a lovely idea. Kevin, I mean, no one has come to my office ever to say, Patrick, I got a crappy idea I want to share with you. You know, nobody.
Yeah, let me share that crappy idea with you, Patrick.
I got a lousy idea for you today. Yes, right? Everyone has a great idea. So we get a bit disappointed when mine wasn't selected. So first of all, our process ranks it by impact potential. So we try and divorce it from like the idea came from Patrick or from Kevin. We try and divorce it from the emotions. So we want to rank it purely based on revenue impact and our ability to actually get it done. So we try and take that out. Secondly, still there's a bit of ownership, right? So I don't want to see my idea die. That's okay. We'll put it, if it's a good idea, but we don't have space to execute it right now, we'll put it in the idea bench, and that frees up people's brain. Because one of the problems that companies have is that people have what I call back pocket priorities. So we agree we're not going to do this, right? We agreed, right? But okay, I agree I'm not going to eat this, right? So, but that's okay. I'm just going to put it in my back pocket. All right, it's in my back pocket now, and we're not going to do it. But then when you're not looking, I pull out my back pocket and I start fooling around with it. I don't want those back pocket priorities. I want all these back pocket priorities in the idea bench. And I don't want you fooling around with it because that's distracting and that takes you away from your focus of the 3 things that we agreed was going to be worked on. So that's the idea bench.
So I'll say this, everybody. If you don't have an idea bench, which you may not have had before now, but if you don't have a list of laters, then trust me, when you start developing your daily thinking habit, you'll start to have them because that will create more and more ideas simply because you're making the time to do it. So we've talked about thinking, which, as you said, intertwined with planning and doing. I want to go to planning because, and I know that you know this, that people have a love-hate, especially in organizations, a love-hate relationship with planning. So
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about why planning is important. Like everybody sort of knows that. But I think a lot of us could be better at it. So what are some of the things you would suggest we do as a leader of our team or of an organization to help make our planning be more effective?
Yeah. So let me start with a bold statement or an inflammatory statement, depending on how you look at it. Okay. If you don't like to do planning, you're just doing it wrong. Okay, I said it. So send me a hate mail, whatever. But you're just doing it wrong. So most people think of planning as, oh my God, we're gonna sit in a room, we're just gonna boil the ocean, etc. And for me, planning is really simple. It's you got to take the time to actually have the difficult discussions that you didn't have before that caused you to not execute well and therefore miss your commitments. Because what I advocate for is a 2-day planning session every single quarter. And so some of my friends would say, well, oh my God, Patrick, that's like a lot of time. I say, no, it's not. It really isn't. Because what you're going to do, or some people say to me, does it take that long to plan? No, it doesn't. But really what it takes time to do is there are projects that you're running that people are not aligned on. And they're happening right now. And when that happens, your return on payroll, which means the salary you're paying, is poor, right? In other words, you've already cut those payroll checks. Now it's about making sure that all that money deposited in people's bank accounts comes back to you in priorities that are committed to being executed really, really well. Your return on payroll is not very good if people have lack of focus, lack of clarity, and lack of alignment. So most people stop when they've decided what the priorities are. I gotta tell you, for me, that's just the beginning, because what I care about is execution planning, is actually the how. How are you and I going to get that together in alignment? So you got to spend your time discussing the actual projects that you're working on to gain alignment. All the things you're afraid to say, hey, you're not on time on Friday, man. I really don't like that. I mean, you got to say that. You got to get that on the table. And then you build what I call the execution plan. We're on this journey together. The goal is just a destination, but how are we going to walk this journey together? So in your planning process, you're going to be spending some time on that, actually, on how we're going to walk this process together. How I know that you don't need my help over here, but you need my help over there. How do we be more cross-functional and collaborative? Because face it, nowadays projects are complex, and sometimes you actually need the expertise of friends in other teams and other departments. When do we bring those guys and gals over? And when we need them, let's not surprise them. Because especially if you're in finance or IT or one of those support organizations, you can identify with this, right? Somebody walks in and says, Patrick, I need this, blah, blah, blah. And you go, when did you know about this? Why did I just find out about it today, that you need a new laptop like tomorrow for the new employee that is arriving tomorrow? And you go, well, it wasn't the
you
plan.
hired 2 weeks ago, right?
That's right. You hired 2 weeks ago. And it's like, what is the plan? I'm like, well, dude, that's not in my plan. Maybe it was in your plan. So now we begin to get stressed, and we're going to get, a little annoyed with each other. Totally avoidable if we had that discussion at the beginning of the quarter and say, hey, this is my plan. I've got 3 guys joining this quarter, week 7, week 9, week 12, and I need laptops for them. Oh, okay. Now you're giving me, 7 weeks runway to go get those laptops and things like that. So it's all about making sure that we're all aligned on our execution. And that's how you do your planning.
And see, I love that idea of rhythm again. And I love your expanded thinking about planning. I really love your line. If you don't like planning, you're doing it wrong. And when I think about planning, it gets me excited, right? It gets me excited because it helps us see the opportunities in the future. It helps us think about how can we actually seize those opportunities. And I love your point about thinking about this, about execution, and not just on what we want to get to, not just destinations, but execution along the way. One of the things that most organizations try to build but again, don't always do a great job of building, that you talk about a good bit, and I think is critical for us to talk about, is this idea of leading indicators. So can you just sort of talk about leading indicators for a second? Perhaps maybe like, how do we identify them? Maybe be a good place to start.
So leading indicators, not everyone may know what that means. And leading indicators are metrics that you'd measure. They can maybe key performance indicators that tell you or give you a little bit of a lead up to what's about to happen, right? So I like to think of them as a little bit predictive. And the reason why we do them is to get just a little bit of future vision and avoid getting blindsided, because no one has ever walked into my office saying, Patrick, I enjoyed the train wreck that I had today, right? No one enjoys a train wreck. So how do you build a leading indicator? Is you start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey teaches us. So this is the goal. And then from that goal, you ask yourself the famous 5 why questions. Why is this goal important? Why do we need to do this? And then maybe you add in a who's doing this or what happens where. But you want to ask about 4 or 5 questions, whether it's a why question or a what question. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find out what are the key things which really influence the outcome. And so then you pick the one that you think gives you the most predictability. Now, leading indicators are not always exact. So for the people in the room who like to be exact, and by the way, I'm an electrical engineer, so I like to be exact. But I've realized that leading indicators, they're not exact. So I drive to the airport and I have to cross over these railway tracks every single time I do that. The railway tracks have a great leading indicator, right? Ding, 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 ding. And then the thing comes down, tells you a train's coming. So it stops you from driving over the train rail tracks so you don't get smacked on the side by a train. That's exactly a great example of a leading indicator. Now, once in a while, ding, 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 this thing comes down. Nothing happens, no train, ding, 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 goes up. I don't get pissed off. I don't go, what the hell's the damn train? Why'd you stop? No, I go, okay, no train, no big deal, and just drive to the airport. So my point is that a leading indicator will tell you what's about to happen, very probable. But if it doesn't happen, it's okay. So like sometimes another business example would be that people stare at their revenue or their sales contracts and they say, we need to close $1 million worth of sales this quarter. Where's my million? Well, how many meetings did you have? How many proposals did you send out? If you can show me how many proposals and meetings you have, I don't even need to look at how many deals you've closed. Like if you don't have enough meetings generated, you can forget about looking at your sales number, right? So that's a leading indicator. So for different companies, they may be different, but the usual suspects for sales would be the size of the last category of my sales pipeline, the number of meetings I've done, the number of demonstrations I've done if I'm a software company, and the number of proposals I've done if I am a consulting firm. I still remember a customer walking in saying, Patrick, I'm so happy. I know we're doing planning for this quarter, but my quarter's done. This is the VP of sales. And I said, really? How'd you know that? She said, well, we typically close, 70% of the companies that are in the last category of our sales pipeline. Now, I have $1 million quota. My sales pipeline is at 1.5 million in the last category. 30% of that is 1.2 million. I am golden, Patrick. I'm going to have a great quarter. Even if I screw up a little bit, I'll probably still get my $1 million. So that was her leading indicator, that she had very good visibility on the deals that were in the final stage of her pipeline. But that's that company. Every company has a different way of doing that. So that's what you want to look for as your leading indicator.
I love that. It's a great example. I'm looking at our time, and I want to talk a little bit about the do step. And I specifically want to pick something. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about actually executing on our plan that we could talk about, of course. And I'm talking with Patrick Thean, the author of the revised copy of Rhythm, and I hope that you'll get a copy. But I want to talk about something that's, it's near the back of the book. When you talk about something called the meeting with yourself or meeting with myself. Yes. Talk about that for a second, because it kind of loops back to where we started, something that we as leaders aren't doing often enough, regardless of our level. So talk about that for a minute.
So meaning myself is very similar to the reflection stuff that we talked about earlier. The idea is you close your week. You got to close your week. And the way our system works, our methodology works, is that everything that you're working on, we want you to provide a status or a forecast of whether you're going to achieve your plan for the quarter. So we want you to close your week, kind of take stock, reflect, and know whether or not you're achieving your goals. Then we want you to actually provide a status on your priorities and your key performance indicators. Our status is a little bit different, though. We don't want to ask you what you've already done. We want to ask you, based on what you've achieved, how likely are you to achieve your overall commitments for the quarter, right? This is the key. This is what I call a minor major. Slightly different than most people with major different results. The reason why I say that is that I've walked into a sales meeting before where the head of sales or sales rep would say, Patrick, I'm doing great. It's week 4, week 5 of a quarter, and I've already closed, 80% of my number. I'm golden. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, show me a pipeline. And how are you going to get the other 20%? And they look at me and go, what pipeline? I've closed everything. I'm like, okay, well, if you closed everything and you're at 70 or 80%, are you still going to achieve the $1 million quota for this quarter? And I get the look of death. It's like, oh shit, I didn't realize. Oh my God. Right. So that's where
I was going to say that when you were talking about in the last example with the guy, I'm like, I'm going to be at 1.2, but I'm like, what are the stages before that? Right.
Right. So the point is that you now want to provide a status on whether or not you're going to achieve your goals. So you do this for your personal effectiveness, but also for the effectiveness of your team, and also as leading indicators for your manager to look at and say, wait a minute, we as a team need to pull up right now. You know what? It's week 7 or week 6. We got another 6 weeks or 7 weeks to go. We can solve this problem. So this is all about getting early warning. So your meaning of yourself is for each and every team member to take stock. And then you put it into our software or whatever method you're using. So in your weekly meeting, you can now tackle that proactively, and not wait and get surprised week 12 and go, oh my God, I only have 1 more week to solve this. And I've found that sometimes early victories in a quarter can cause this overwhelmingly and incorrect self-confidence that we're going to get this quarter done. And then it's the whole turtle and hare story, right? The hare ran like, I'm going to win this race. I can chill out now. You haven't got pipeline, dude. What's wrong with you? No, you can't stop here. You're not there yet. Keep going. So that's the meaning of myself. There's been so many times when people do that and they begin to review to themselves more stuff that has to get done for them to succeed.
Yeah, I love that. So I wanted to step back and ask you one other thing before we shift into the final portion of our conversation, Patrick. As a person who's been both an entrepreneur and a business owner, as well as one who's been inside of many others as a coach, and thirdly, as someone who is an electrical engineer, my question for you is this: what are a couple of key mindsets that you think set effective leaders apart? What are a couple of key leadership mindsets that you would highlight for us today?
That's a great question. Some key leadership mindsets. And I would first preface my answer by these can be different. It may not fit every single person. But here are some that I live by, that I want my teams to think hard about. I think, first of all, I ask my teams to create the mindset of being able to take risk and accept mistakes. And by the way, if you want creativity and inspiration, innovation, you've got to be able to allow mistakes to happen. So most people have the mindset of perfection. Like I don't want to make my boss mad. I want to make sure I get this right. And I was telling one of my teammates this week, actually, and by the way, this mindset, I have to continually renew that in my company, continually let everyone know that they're not going to get whacked on the side of the head if they make a mistake. And so this person asked me about submitting some of her work to me, and I said, I want it to come quicker, and I could see that she wanted to get it right. And I said, I'm not interested in you getting it right. I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in speed and you learning. That's what I'm looking for. Speed and you learning. So I'm not looking at you getting it perfect. Getting it perfect takes a lot of time. Now, we got to be careful,
right? There.
I'm not suggesting that if you have to deliver something to a customer that they've paid for, they can just ship crap. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying internally, like I want us to get more repetitions in, and if you get it wrong with me, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I want more speed, more reps, and I want you to learn. So those are some mindsets which I think are important. I think another mindset that's really important is I'm passionate about customer success, and I'm very passionate about going the second mile for both my employees and my customers. So if you want your customers to succeed, you've got to first make your employees successful. And so you can't have the mindset that says, we don't care about you, just make the customer successful. You've got to know what it feels like to be successful. Then you can make the customer successful. So go the second mile is both a mindset as well as a core value for us. And then the third one I'll share quickly would be I like to make sure that we have spicy conversations, which means if you have a challenge with me, let's talk about it so we can clear the air. Because if we don't have those spicy, difficult conversations, it builds. It's almost like, that it becomes the elephant in the room much later on that we didn't deal with when it was a tiny little baby elephant. So I jokingly say when someone says, Patrick, how do you eat an elephant? Most people say one step at a time. I mean, one bite at a time. I say no, because to eat an elephant one bite at a time is still a 7-ton animal and still causes indigestion and pain. I'd rather just eat the baby elephant, right? So that's one of the mindset things is when you see an issue with a teammate, just stop, pause, have that spicy conversation, and eat that baby elephant.
I love that. So many things, as we've chatted, Patrick, are all connected. It almost comes back to where you started, which was if we're thinking ahead, if we know where we're going, if we have leading indicators, we allow ourselves to even recognize that there is a baby elephant, if you will. A couple things before we finish, kind of rounding into the final turn, Patrick. And the first one is, what do you do for fun?
I do photography. I do photography, and my little daughter, teaches me how to play the piano. So those are the two things that I do for fun. And I would say, I'm at that phase in life where every day, every hour I get with my family is precious to me. So I've been prioritizing just spending time with my wife and my girls. And I know that sounds like a I don't know, kind of a lame, boring answer, but that's just where I'm in life right now. I think when I was younger, I was like, I got more things to do. As I'm older, I got more people I want to be with.
I love that. People versus things.
Yeah.
Away from people, though, for a second, I'm confident that, like me, you're a reader. So I'm curious, what's something you've read recently, Patrick, or that you're reading now?
So something I've read recently that has been very helpful for me is a book called Falling Upward. Falling Upward by Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R is his name. And, the book talks about, really helps me just to really focus on my being, just kind of allowing myself to be what God's made me to be and relax a little bit more, and really understand how I can be more helpful to others as I understand myself a little bit better. So it's more of a psychology type book, but I found that very helpful for myself.
If I were to encapsulate everybody this episode and this conversation, I would say that we've talked about several things that we as leaders often don't do very well. And that includes taking care of ourselves, understanding ourselves, thinking, learning, and planning. I think would maybe some of the key things we've talked about today. And Patrick, I really appreciate you being here. But there's one other question I know you want me to ask, and that is, where can we learn more? Where do you want to point people? Where can people get a hold of a copy of this great book, Rhythm? Like, where do you want to point people?
So I want to point you to my website, patrickthean.com. And I have a gift for everybody, actually. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see something called the Organizational Effectiveness Test. And it's a free survey that if you take, it will then give you some insights on your execution and how well you're achieving your commitments. And that's free for you. It's a takeaway that, don't miss that. And of course, you can buy my book on Amazon. And please leave me a review on the book if you do that. Thank you very much for having me.
Patrick Thean, Patrick, Thean, Thean.com. That's where you can find that. Now I have a question for all of you before we go. As we finish up, the question I ask you every week is this. Now what? What action are you going to take as a result of this conversation, of you soaking in the wisdom and the insight of Patrick? Thinking about the things that we've talked about is fine. But what really will set you apart, what will really make the last 40 minutes worth your time, will be the action that you take as a result. And I've got a ton of notes here. If you've been watching, you know that my head has been down because I'm taking notes, even though I've already read the book, thinking about what I could do. Think about notes in terms of what will I do as opposed to what did I learn. And so it always is our hope that you leave here with an idea that you will implement, because when you do, you will make this of much greater value for you. And when you do that, you'll want to come back. You'll want to tell your friends that they ought to come listen to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You will go to wherever it is that you're watching or listening to this and leave a review, give it 5 stars. You know how it works, whatever platform you happen to be on. I hope you'll do that. And I hope you'll be back with us next week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.